Hi everybody, welcome back to Ubersploit. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about hammocking, and I'm taking on a new adventure. It's really cold outside, so we decided to do this inside instead of being on the top of somewhere like Elliott Knob. We're going to be creating a new hammock. I've been camping for about 2 years with a Hennessy hammock, one of the expeditions, and absolutely loved it. But now I'm getting to the point where I want to start combining some things. I just got a winter tarp I want to have, and I don't necessarily want the bug net over my head and all that sort of stuff. I want to be able to sit up in my hammock and have breakfast or those kind of things. I started out, I got this from the do-it-yourself hammock gear or do-it-yourself gear that's on hammock forums. And I got about 4 yards of 1.6 ounce nylon. It's ripstop nylon. Now I got about 4 yards because I want to do some other stuff. You really only need about 3.5 for a hammock. If you're going with a double layer hammock where you're going to be putting in an actual pad in there, you really want to go with about twice that with 7 yards. We're not doing that. This is a single layer hammock. I'm trying to get the weight down. I already have an underquilt to go with this system, and we got that from Arrowhead over at Kick-Ass Quilts, which is awesome. Those guys are amazing. Worked with Paul a couple of times. He's even rushed out a couple of things for our last winter trip for us. So anyway, thank you and a shout out to those guys. Anyway, here we have 4 yards of our non-rip. Did I say that? Non-rip nylon here, and it's 1.6 ounces. It's not the 1.9 or the 1.1 that you're used to seeing. And the second thing we have, I ended up doing 2 sets of Amstel, and this is an Amstel blue. I know it looks gray, but it is Amstel blue, or what they call Amstel blue. It's great for carrying weight, putting the tie-ins on the end of your hammock, that sort of stuff. I got 2 different sections here because one is for my actual binding the ends of my hammock. The other that I'm going to use to go across and be my basically my ridge line going that holds the angle on the ends of my hammock, and we'll talk a little more about that. So the next thing I did with the do-it-yourself, I ordered these. Now these are aluminum rings. They're rated to 1,100 pounds each with double rings. I don't know if it's true, but I'm assuming if I had double rings around it, that I'm up around 2,200 pounds, which should just be fine. Now typically I'd recommend going with the steel rings. These guys said it was great. It's no problem. They're lightweight. They're aluminum. We'll try it out. I hope I don't end up in my back in the middle of out there. But I'm basically putting a new hammock suspension system where I'm just using the basic nylon straps and my Amstel tie-ins on the end of my hammock. Which brings us to our tree straps and our regular straps. So the first one is my regular nylon straps here. And this is a 1-inch. Now I got like 30 foot of this because I'm going to have a really long strap on each side. So I'm going to have 15 foot, and I can just cinch that down through my rings as short or as long as I want it to be. Finally, I got a few sewing odds and ends to go through this. I got a white marker to write on our actual nylon that we're putting on there so that we can measure everything out for our hammock. Now I got a sewing measuring tape. You can use a regular measuring tape. I just found that when you're pinning stuff down and it moves around, you can actually pin this to it as well. Helps measure stuff out, keep it kind of square, and we'll go through some of that. I got 2 sets of needles here, and this is for our sewing machine, and you'll see this in a little bit. Now, the first one we have is a 9014. The 9014 we're really using for this webbing, for our tree straps, and for part of our suspension system. That should be fine going through that. But sewing through this really fine, slippery nylon, you want something a little smaller. Excuse me. So this is with a size 60 needle. They're much smaller, and that's to go through that much smaller pieces there. Finally, last but not least, is don't go cheap on the thread. So I have bulky nylon thread that I'm going to be using. This will make sure that it's not stretching a lot, that it doesn't rot as it gets out in the weather and that sort of stuff like a cotton thread will do. So anyway, let's touch base. I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. Alright, so here we are at the sewing machine. I know you can't see me here in the video, but I wanted you to see kind of the setup. I went out and got it's a fairly cheap sewing machine. This is great for what we're doing. And got a couple of set of needles. I don't know if you can see this, but this is our 60 by 60/8. And here we have our 90/14. And we use these set of needles for very different things. This is a very important aspect whenever you're sewing. You want to make sure you have a needle that matches the materials. Your 90/14 is a little bit thicker needle, which means that's going to be for our webbing and that type of stuff. Your 60/8 is a much smaller, thinner needle to go through the nylon. You don't need that bulk going through there. Plus it's a material that doesn't stretch very much. So a thinner needle will help you go through that with less snags and knots in the bottom, especially when we start setting up our bobbin and that type of stuff. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. For everybody that's out there, when I first started doing this, I had never really worked with a sewing machine, never did any of that sort of stuff. So I think the first piece is, you know, how do we set this up? So this is going to be a whole series that we're going through. It's not just going to be one long video. And this particular one is setting up our sewing machine. And the final piece that we have here is our nylon thread. And we'll go through how to set that up, how to set up our bobbin, how to get all that stuff on there. So as you take this apart, this is the foot and this is where everything goes in. If we pull this out of the way, I'm just going to open this panel up. You'll see that right inside here, I don't know if you can see this, but right inside here there's a little mechanism. If you just lift this little thing out, there it is right there. It looks like that. It has this little arm over the top of it. And if you flip it around, it's hollow on the inside, and you may have a little plastic around spool of thread in there. What we need to do first is go in here and make sure that we can get the bobbin part, or the bottom part of the piece of the sewing that goes up through and ties the knots as we're going through and sewing on the machine. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit, about how to set that up, but that's the first piece. Alright, so we're going to put this back on just real quickly. Now most machines come with a way of actually doing the threading and putting everything on the bobbin for you on these small little round pieces here, on these small spools. You know, it's kind of embarrassing. I go to a lot of these places. I went to Joanna's today and picked up some of the stuff, and it's funny, a lot of people that go in there, you're buying sewing stuff, and it's surprising how many questions you get about what are you doing and what's going on. And I don't think they see very many men in there going to sew stuff, so it's kind of a fun experience to see people's reactions. Alright, so there we have some of our thread. So on these you'll find a little thread. Now this thread's really fine. It's one of the reasons that you want to use that finer needle as well, because it's a nylon thread. Now this is a pretty strong thread. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up and we're going to put this on our spindle. We're going to come through here, and you'll see, I didn't want that. Come around this side, and you can just kind of slide this through. It'll go up in here. So it goes through this little loop. I don't know if you can see this. We're going to wrap around the front of this little, not this little spindle. That's not a spindle, but it's a little screw thing on the top that you run your thread under. And you're going to cross over back this way. Alright, then we're going to take one of our little plastic spools, and we're going to go from the inside out through that little hole right there. Once we have that, come over here and we'll slide this down on the top just like that. Alright, now this is bulky stuff, so you'll see it start spreading out on you. I know that's a little bit there, and I'll turn this a couple of times to kind of get started, and I flip this over. Now once that's done, that's locked in, I can kind of just hold the top of this. Now you can't really see it, but a sewing machine works a lot like a car does, and it has a gas pedal, and you're going to decide how fast or slow you want to drive your car, so to speak. So how fast or slow you want to drive your sewing machine. So we're going to start out kind of slow, and we're going to wind this thread. Now whenever you're doing this, your needle's not going to go up and down all that. When you slide this over, it releases it. So we're just going to do this, and you'll see it starts. There we go. Sometimes I'll help guide a little bit. It'll get heavy on one side and not the other, and try to get it so it evens out a little bit and just doesn't stay down at the bottom. There's a fair amount, when you're talking about nylon, there's a fair amount of thread on a nylon spool because it's so thin. I think this little spool has probably around 1,100 feet, I believe is what it was. So you'll have a good bit of thread on this thing. So what'll happen is it gets full. All it'll do is it'll just kind of like stop on you so that you can trim everything out. All right, so we're gonna knock this loose, pull it off here, cut it loose on this side, and then we have our bobbin. I'm gonna pull this out, and what I typically do here as well is just trim that off to make sure that we're all good. There we go. So now that we have that, I'm going to show you how to load your bobbin. Now this is a very important part. If you don't do this right, you're going to get tangled all the time. It's going to be frustrating. So take heed. If you do it right, you'll go through your whole bobbin without getting a knot just about. Alright, so we're going to pull our bobbin out again like we said. And you want to make sure your thread is running clockwise. So it's going to be running across the top of your bobbin when you turn this around and you're looking at you and the little arms at the top. You're just going to stick that in there just like that. Now you should have some kind, if you see, like you'll have a little groove right there. You're just going to take your string, pull it to the groove, and pull it up to the top. And you should have it up there. Now, one of the ways you can test it, if you should do it hard, it should drop a little bit, right? But it shouldn't go all the way, and you know that the tension's right and all that sort of stuff. So you know when we're in there, you want your string to be the right hand of this little arm. You're just going to leave that hanging, and we're going to put it in there. Now there's a little door, a little thing right here. You'll see it will drop it. It pulls out and in. It's spring loaded, and it's what locks it into the bobbin. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide that in, open it up, make sure it locks in, and we're good. I don't need all of that, but I want to leave about 3 inches of thread in there, and I can just shut that, believe it or not, and we're all ready. Our bobbin's loaded. So it's pretty quick once you get used to doing that. You'll spindle it up, do whatever. Sometimes I'll set up 1 or 2 of them for the video. I didn't want to do that, and we're good to go. That's our top part. Now this is a little bit faster machine for loading this. Some of the older machines take a little bit longer as far as threading your needle. The next piece we want to do is actually go in and thread our needle. So I know I'm going to be working with nylon first. I'm not going to be working with my webbing. So I'm going to be working with my 1.6 ounce nylon. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and grab one of my 60 needles. And I don't know if you can see this, but that's a really fine needle right there. That's really small. If you were to compare it to our 90s, one of our 90s over here. You can see there's a pretty big difference there between the two. Alright, so we're going to use our 60 first. We have this really thin nylon. So all of the needles, if you look at this one, they have a flat side. On this system, the flat side goes towards the back. Some go sideways. You'll be able to find it. Just read your manual for your machine and it'll tell you which way it goes in. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and slide our needle up in there. And sometimes you'll have to start by going down and up. And then you're just going to tighten this up to secure your needle. Alright, there we go. Alright guys, let's talk about threading this needle. So I'm going to undo this real quick. Basically we're still going to keep our thread over here on the right. It's going to go through this little eye over here. But we're not going to go around the little top of this. We're actually going to go up underneath it and pull it over and through. You'll see it just runs behind this and through that little groove. We're going to go down in the front, wrap it around, Now it's important whenever you're doing this, whenever you put your needle in and whenever you thread, that your needle is all the way up. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bar right there, and it shows that it's up. I'm going to pull this out so you can see it real quick, but now it's down. You'll see it went down, and we have it back up. And the other thing is, you always want to turn the spin from the right hand side. You always want it to go towards you, so you're going to turn it towards you over the top like this. You never want to go in the other direction, or you could damage stuff inside the machine. It's always meant to go in that one direction. So basically, we're going to do this, go up through here, and we're going to go around the top of this. This is why you set this. There's a little groove in there, you'll see, and it hangs on to the top of that. We're going to go through here. Now on this machine, you can't really see it, I'm sure, but on this machine you got to go through the top, down the needle. So that's basically what we're going to do. And a lot of times I'll lick this at this point. I know that's awful, right? So I'll stick this through here. We'll come through the other side. I'll pull it down. You'll see how it went through the top. And then this needle's so small, and you can get a thing to help you thread on, but I'm kind of used to where that hole is now, and I'm kind of away from it because I'm trying to film this at the same time. But basically I'm going to go right through the center. There we go. There we go. It's amazing. Just that little bit of difference. So we have that, and then we're going to wrap it around, kind of pull it through here, and you'll see on mine, let's get this back into focus for you. You'll see right here on the side, I just have a little cutter right here, and I'll cut that, but I'm not going to do that now because I want to actually pull the rest of this through. So the next thing I want to do is, you'll see I only have one string here, and I need to have one coming through the bottom as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this to the back and get it out of the way. I'll run it down and up, and I'll do it one more time. And what it should do is pull up 2 sets of strings. So what I'm going to do is just slide my scissors or something through here. Didn't quite go through. Let's try it again. There we go. We got both of them that time. Oh, let's try this one more time. We'll cut those out of there once we get this. There it is. I thought I had it last time. So we have one from the top, and you'll see you have one from our bobbin that we set up earlier. I'm going to pull this over to the side, and I'm just going to trim these off. So there you go, we're all set. We're ready to start sewing. Now we're going to switch back, go over, and we're going to start measuring our materials out and decide where we're going to go from there. Clean off our space, get ready to work.